Aloha, everyone. My name is Rob Hack. I'm from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. We usually go by the acronym HPEC, and we are a local nonprofit based in Honolulu, tied to the U.S. Commercial Service in Washington, D.C. And we have one commercial service officer in Hawaii. His name is John Holman. He's the executive secretary of our organization by statute. And our charge is to help Hawaii companies export. And to be clear, exporting is to a foreign country, not to the mainland, but to Japan, Korea, Germany, Brazil, Canada, Mexico, and the like. We are able to put on this series of webinars and perform one-on-one company mentoring sessions because we received a grant each year from DBET. That's part of the HiSTEP program, which will be explained in a few minutes. And overall, nationwide, the STEP program, or State Trade Expansion Program, is administered by the Small Business Administration in Washington, D.C., or SBA. So we would very much like to thank DBET and SBA for the grant that allows us to put on what I believe are very informational and helpful seminars and the one-on-one company mentoring sessions for our local companies. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jamie Lum. She manages the program at DBET, and she will be talking about the HiSTEP 2024 program in general. So Jamie, please.
Aloha, everyone. I'm Jamie Lum with the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. And as Rob mentioned, we do administer for the state of Hawaii what is called the STEP grant, which comes from the SBA. STEP standing for State Trade Expansion Program, and in Hawaii, we have branded it as the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program, or HiSTEP. So basically what it is, it's a export development program for businesses in Hawaii that are interested in selling their Hawaii-made products or services to the global in the global marketplace. We have several partners that we work with to administer the program, HPEC being one of them, and thanks to Rob and all of those on the HPEC that help us put together these types of seminars. And then, of course, we work with a number of other people like the SBDCs and the Patsy Mink Center and VBOC. And I'll explain a little bit more how these organizations come into play. But all of these organizations collectively, over the years, we've really developed a really good, I think, ecosystem for helping companies that are interested in exporting. So what are we looking to accomplish with the HiSTEP program? Basically, what we want to achieve and what we'd like to see is to expand the amount of exports, meaning dollar amount of exports from Hawaii of Hawaii-made products and services. And then we'd like to see a larger number of Hawaii companies engaging in exporting. And then lastly, we want to see more international markets penetrated with the sale of goods and services. The eligibility, in order to, HiSTEP is open to companies, whether they're new to export or they're already exporting and maybe looking to expand. But basically, this is the basic eligibility criteria, is that you have to meet the federal definition of an eligible small business. There is a form that companies will, it's a self-certification form that says you meet these basic criteria. You also have to, company can't be barred from receiving federal funds. And then you also be registered with DCCA and also with the Department of Taxation and have a GET license. So that's kind of the basic eligibility. One thing I should mention that SBA does require is that companies have to have a product or service that's at least 51% US made. For Hawaii, we do try to also hold the standard of made in Hawaii being 51% made. So we do look to give preference to companies that do meet that criteria. So we basically have three components of our program. We have what we call our export readiness, of which this seminar is a part of that. We work with HPEC to put on monthly seminars or webinars on either export-related topics or market-specific sessions. So as I said, we normally put those on monthly, and you can go to our website to look for those. And those of you that are on already know that these are free. All you have to do is sign up, and then we do record them, and we do keep copies of all of our past webinars on our website, and HPEC also posts them on their website too. So it goes back several years on, as I said, many different topics. And so that's part of export readiness, as well as one-on-one business advising services. And I mentioned all of those partners that we work with. So when you register for HiSTEP, what we do is we do assign companies to one of our partner organizations to have at least one one-on-one session where our partners can talk with you a little bit more, learn a little bit more about your company and what your export goals are, and kind of see what your export experience is, and make suggestions as to what kinds of activities you might want to look at, either within the HiSTEP program, or sometimes it might be something outside of HiSTEP, but something that can help you with exporting. Some companies perhaps might not even be ready for exporting, and so our partners will help guide companies to basically look at things that can help strengthen your company, maybe in order to get you ready for exporting. But the basic idea of the export readiness is really to gear you up and get you prepared to either put together an export plan if you don't already have one, or maybe if you have one, take another look at it and see if it needs to be, revised in any way. So that's the first portion, really getting you ready to participate in the next two components, which we have our market entry and expansion activities. Basically, those would involve trade shows, international trade shows, consumer shows, and then we also have some opportunities for e-commerce platforms for the Japanese market, for companies that might want to look at that as a way to sell their products. And then finally, we have our company assistance, which is direct financial assistance to help companies support some of their export activities. This is based on, it's a separate process from registering for HiSTEP. It is a separate application process, and we break it out between new to export companies and market expansion companies. Companies can apply for up to $5,000 if you're a new to export company, and up to $15,000 if you're a market expansion company. Really, the key part of your application is an export plan, and there's an evaluation committee that will go through it, and companies will also make presentations, and then it will be evaluated, and then companies will be awarded. This is done on a reimbursement basis, so companies will actually have to spend money first, and then they come back to us with the proper documentation for us to be able to reimburse their costs. Some of the kinds of expenses that you can use the HiSTEP funds for are things like if you're doing e-commerce, if you want to set up e-commerce for international sales, or if you need to do translation of your website or other marketing materials. You can use the funds to participate in other trade shows. They don't have to necessarily be the trade shows that we organize. You can use it for airfare to the trade shows, or maybe a trade mission, or maybe you need to meet with customers in another country, potential customers or buyers. It can be used for some of the U.S. commercial services, such as a gold key service that will help you in your as you look at a particular market and explore the market for potential export opportunities. It can be used for product testing if you have a product that needs to be certified before it can be sold in a particular market. So that's just kind of an idea of the kinds of activities that you can use HiSTEP funds for. So those are the three basic components of our program. If you're interested, I would ask that you go to our website, which is invest.hawaii.gov. And then if you go under the exporting tab, you'll see there, you'll see the HiSTEP program. So that's where you would go to register. So that's the first step. You register for the program, and then we would put you in touch. If you look at that sort of this picture here, we put you in touch with one of our partner organizations for your one-on-one business advising. And then from there, you can choose to participate in some of the activities we have. And that's kind of a broad overview. All of the information that I've just gone over is on our website. There's my contact information, as well as my colleagues, Mark Ritchie and Lyle Fujikawa, who also help with the program. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. And if you have any questions, I'll take questions now too. But I thank you very much for your for attending today, and look forward to working with you.
There's a question. Will the PowerPoint slides be available after? Yes, I will send a shared folder link where you'll be able to download and view PDF versions of the PowerPoint. Jamie, I'm trying to share your website just so we can review that quickly with people, because this is our first big event of the year. And it may be helpful for people to go through the website very quickly and just make sure that they're registered for HiSTEP notifications and what have you. Here's all of the at invest.hawaii.gov. You click on this exporting tab at the top, and it'll take you to this front page of the website that Jamie had brought up. And then there's quite a bit of information over here on the side as to HiSTEP ERP, HiSTEP company assistance, and then the market entry and expansion activities, such as pavilions.
Yeah, most of that didn't come out on the screen.
We're only seeing a portion of the screen, just to let you know, Rob.
Yeah, Jamie only shared a snapshot of the screen. This is the full website here. And so if you go to invest.hawaii.gov and click on this exporting tab, it'll take you to all of this. And there's quite a bit of information here, including how to subscribe to make sure you're getting on the mailing list, which you probably already are if you received the email to sign up for this event. But just to be sure, and if there's any of your colleagues or others that you know who could benefit from these export programs, then please ask them to sign up here. I'll also add that this event is being recorded, and eventually, after I do a little bit of editing of it, it will make its way to our YouTube archive here, where if you go back, you can see lots of videos. 84 now. I think by the end of this cycle will be at 100 or near 100 by the end of this year. And we cover all kinds of issues that can be country specific, such as exporting to Vietnam, for example, or we've done island specific exporting from Kauai, exporting from Hawaii Island, from Maui, etc. Exporting of agricultural products, which we'll be doing again in May of this year. So anyway, DBAT also archives these videos on their website as well. So please feel free to invest some time and check those out. Okay, thank you very much, Jamie. That was a great presentation and introduction to HiSTEP 2024. The next presentation is from Kanzo Nara. He's from Imagine Web Creation. I love having Kanzo-san as a speaker, and he's going to talk to us about bilingual websites, social media for exporters, and some talk about AI also, which is everybody's hearing about, and how that can be useful in the IT space for exporters. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kanzo-san, and please begin.
Okay, thank you, Rob-san. Thank you for organizing today. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. Today, I would like to speak about bilingual websites with an emphasis on new AI features to help you run your website better. So we will jump right into my presentation. Okay, first thing with any website is we need to start off with getting a domain. And a lot of my clients start off on the wrong foot by purchasing a domain. You need to understand the correct way of purchasing a domain when you're going international. There's two separate ways. There's the multilingual website version, and then there's a multi-regional website. Multi-regional is if your website is, let's say, in Canada, but it wants to be for the Japanese market in Canada. Multilingual is a website that could be here in Hawaii, but you want to cater to the Korean, Chinese, and Japanese. So that's the two big differences. The actual domains will look something like this. So .com is very popular. There's a whole list of more other domains you can get now, like .shop, .home, and so on. But when you're going international, you want to stay focused and on topic. So another popular one in Japan is a .co.jp. They have the same version of this in Korean and Chinese as well. This one is a little bit harder to get because you need to be incorporated in there in that specific country, but you can get a .jp or a .ko like Korea if you have an address you can use. And the third option here is jp.yourdomain, which is the easiest one because all you need to have is your existing domain and you just tack on what's called an add-on domain. But what you do not want to do is the version at the bottom. You can see at the bottom, it says yourdomain.com/jp. You don't want to do this because it creates a website within a website, and the search engine robots don't like that, and it won't pick up your language that well. If you want more information on this, you can go to a website called developersgoogle.com, where they clarify country-specific domains, subdomains, pros and cons. This is an example directly from Google's guidelines. It's very efficient. So if you're considering to go into a multilingual or multi-geo target, you want to check out this site before you purchase your domain. Okay, getting started with e-commerce. So now we have your domain. We will be setting up, there's three types of e-commerce to start off with. One is having your own website. This has the highest level of customization, but also you have to incur a lot of security, domain fees, hosting fees, compliance for credit card processing, and so on. The second version is a third-party system. This is an easy one to set up. You can use things like Shopify. It helps you get running faster, but you have to work within their parameters and guidelines for the website. And the third one, which is a really increasing market these days, is the online markets like Rakuten or Amazon, where most e-commerces will eventually end up. You can have a merchant account on there. Prime is very popular now. Even here in Hawaii, you get free shipping. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about website design. Website design is quite different when you go into Japan, Korea, and Chinese. This is because of its language and condensed format of using Chinese characters that has different way of appealing to users. So first thing you will notice about websites in Japan, Korea, and China is that they're very content heavy. The second one is there's a lot of banner ads. And I will show a few examples how this looks like. Okay, first we'll take a look at web design from McDonald's US. This is probably very familiar to us. You have your header navigation and featured image on top. And this is basically it. Okay, then we go to a website in India, same company, McDonald's. It gets even simpler, just one navigation and some information. Now we're going to jump into the Japanese McDonald's. The Japanese McDonald's has a whole lot of banner ads happening, pricing, menus, a lot of information. One of the things that's significant about this is what we forget about here in Hawaii is Japan, Korea, and China is very season oriented. So a lot of the design features go into the seasonality. So fall time, summer time, and so on. And I know today we'll have somebody else talking about awareness of culture. This is just an example of the Red Cross of what we know in the Western Hemisphere versus the Red Cross like in the Middle East. So design does kind of fall into things, and there's certain colors or marks or icons that are more familiar within a different country. Okay, next is marketing, SEO, and pay-per-clicks. Okay, we're breaking up the marketing into 3 points. The first one is pay-per-click, which is advertising on Google Ads. In case of Japan, you will be advertising through Yahoo sponsored links. This is it's the Yahoo version of Google Ads here in America. So people enter keywords in Japanese and it'll pop up on the Yahoo. And also we have Facebook and Instagram and banner ads. SEO is obviously a necessity whenever you're having a website. It's always good to have natural content and more product detail. And then we have social media, which I will go into more detail of where to focus on for which country. Okay, so this is e-commerce sales by countries. I put in a comparison from 2022 and 2023. So 2022, we saw kind of the height of COVID, people staying home, purchasing a lot online. So China went up to $1.5 trillion in 2022, but in 2023, it came down a little bit to 1.3 trillion. You can see the same thing with the US market. Japan market actually went down almost half. UK, South Korea, India, France, and so on. But you can still notice that a lot of the Asia markets we're talking about today, like China, Japan, and South Korea, have been in the top 5 for the past 5 years. So they're definitely markets you want to tap into if you are an exporter here in Hawaii. Okay, this is something if you're not familiar with the language, for Japanese and Korean especially. Whenever there's a keyword, there's 3 different languages you can use for Japanese and Korean. I'm sorry, not languages, characters. So even if you want to, let's say Hawaii travel, there's 3 different characters that show up here, like Ryoko, and the other one. So you want to make sure you are working with somebody who is not just bilingual when they're speaking, but a bilingual when it comes to reading and writing. Because if you're not using the correct keywords, you could advertise all you want to in the keyword and not get any customers. So it's very important. Okay, so advertising in Japan, this is not only Japan, but understanding Japan and Korea and China market is a lot different than here in the US. It's about the time of day and the devices people use. So in Japan, Korea, you spend a lot of time on public transportation. So you're spending a lot of time on your smartphone. A lot of users in Japan actually carry an additional battery because they use their phone so much when they're outside of their residence. So when you're advertising, you want to make sure people are looking at your ad or your product at the right time. So next, once we have the website and we're advertising, the big way to advertise now is through social media. You want to generate your fan base, get more of your word of mouth out, introduce new products. And a lot of times people kind of piggyback off of the social media that they were using here in the US. But you need to understand which market you're in to fully understand which platform or app you want to use, because you could spend a lot of time investing posts and content when that app might not be very popular in that country. For instance, in Japan, the number one app downloaded is Line at 96 million. YouTube is second. Formerly Twitter, now X, is 66 million, and Instagram. If you look at the global downloads, the first ranking is Facebook. Facebook comes in at number 5 in Japan. YouTube is kind of the same, but now we have WhatsApp at number 3, WeChat, and Instagram. So it's very different, and you want to understand the demographic of the country, gender, and age group of what social media platform you want to invest your time to build. Okay, this is going back to what I was talking about when the advertising, when you want to run your ads and how effective it will be. So in Japan and Korea, a lot of people spend time on public transportation. So you want to advertise probably while they're in transit. And unlike here in the US, Japanese companies are very strict on what websites you can do while you're working. So you're not going to find Japanese employees kind of on Amazon looking for products they want to buy for their, Mother's Day present or anything like that. They're very strict. So they do this on their private time. So transit time, lunchtime, these will be mobile devices. The third search is probably going to be in the evening, and these times is when usually the purchase or the actual transaction conversion will occur. And this could be on desktops many times. So you want to advertise on smartphones for transit and in lunchtime, and then you want to bring in your customer conversion during the evening. Okay, so going back to the transit one, landing pages become very important because unlike a desktop, when you find the website on a desktop, usually you take a look at a couple pages. But on a smartphone, if you don't find that on that specific page, you're going to leave right away. So you want to make sure you have nice landing pages that, here's a couple rules I like to tell my customers is, there's a 2-second rule. You have 2 seconds to grab their attention, and you have to have all the information within 2 swipes. Anything more than that, they're probably going to go back to Google and search for something. So when you're creating your landing page, you want to keep that in mind. Okay, here's the part I was excited about for the last 9 months or so. We've been seeing a lot of new information platforms coming out. And I'd like to introduce some features you can tie in not only with your website, but for e-commerce as well. Okay, the first one is AI automation workflow. This is something that most of my customers, and this is kind of been, not that many people are catching on to this quite so much yet, because they're not sure how to implement it on your website. So I would like to explain some about this. So first, there's 2 words you need to, if you're going to take some information away from my presentation, let it be these 2 words. Triggers and recipes. These are the most important things you need to understand when it comes to AI workflow. So triggers is something that happens on your platform or website. A recipe is what you want that trigger to create or what happens after that. So the AI will take care of the recipe. So here's a few examples. If you write a blog, that will be the trigger. The recipe will be to post it on all of your social media. I know a lot of people, they have their staff, or if you're a sole proprietor, you'll be posting information on your Instagram, and then go to Facebook, then go to Twitter, so on. But you don't have to do that. If you have this trigger set up on your website, you have to just post it once, and the AI will take care of the rest. The other things are if you post something new to your website, instead of going to your newsletter and creating a new newsletter, we can connect the two with your website and have the newsletter get sent automatically. Or there's other triggers such as customer reviews. I know it's nice to get reviews, and Amazon does this a lot where they send reminders to people who have purchased something saying, would you leave a review for us? You can do this for your own company as well. So if somebody purchases something, you can set up a trigger that says, I will email the customer 3 days from now and ask them to leave a review. And this is kind of tedious if you do this manually all the time, because you might have hundreds or thousands of customers who purchase from you a year. But if you set up this trigger, it'll take care of it for the remainder of time. Another interesting popular one going out right now is email data collection. So you can set it up so when you're sending or receiving emails, depending on the content of the email, you will store data collections, let's say like in a Google Drive, where you can start creating more, like let's say like frequently asked questions. You can just kind of get a trend of your customers and understand them better. You can also do the reverse version, which is connecting like Google Drive to your website. So it's hard to give access to everybody to go directly on your website, even when you're using a platform like WordPress. But you can add a cushion, like let's say if you upload content to a specific folder to Google Drive, it'll turn it into a blog automatically. The last one we have is WooCommerce. This is a very popular one when it's coming to, if you're building with WordPress or even just a platform, is you can publish information on WooCommerce and it'll send it to MailChimp automatically. And this is just a couple of examples. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of interactions, triggers, and recipes you can set up to make your business run better, easier, and faster. Okay, this one is, this is nothing new. This has been around for quite a few years now, but the AI chatbots have become more realistically customizable to small and mid-sized companies. And for our case of exporting to international countries, this becomes very important because I know a lot of companies, they don't have the capability of having bilingual staff, especially for like several languages. That's very hard to do. You cannot have
Sorry, Kanzo-san, I'll just interrupt for 1 second and say, I think this is important because in Hawaii, we are offset from time zones by a lot of almost all of the foreign markets that we would be operating in. So if that means if in the Japanese business day, for example, if somebody was trying to contact a Hawaii company, it would be very difficult. Maybe we're already in bed here, for example, or it's the middle of the night. And having a chat bot like this that could handle that in the Japanese language during the Japanese business day would be extremely helpful. Sorry to interrupt you. I just think that the time zones make it even more important.
No, excellent point, Rob-san. Even with myself, I have to contact chat rooms in Japan, contact customer service in the mainland. A lot of times the issue isn't even an issue because if you get it resolved right away, you don't really complain about it. So this is very important. Like even with a t-shirt, you get the wrong color t-shirt, it's a mistake and you want to get it fixed right away. But if you have a delayed response, that's kind of bad for your customer and your review experience. So the chatbot takes care of that on so many levels. The multilingual feature is very nice because you can train your chatbot to be language specific for Korean, Chinese, or Japanese. So you can use this for customer support or just chatting with your customers to a certain extent. We can train your chatbot to go through a specific conversation method that is most common with your customer to figure out where they want to go and what they're needed. So we can train chatbots to do this now. And another thing is you can collect data from the conversation that's happening with your chatbot and your consumer, and you can use that data later on to make it create better leads. So when somebody jumps into a chat room, instead of just saying, hey, go over here and buy this, you want to kind of, be more nice to your customers and have an inviting atmosphere to make them feel comfortable in your website. And just like Robson mentioned, one of the biggest one is it improves response time. And people know about chatbots, and they know it's not a human being talking, but you can train your chatbot to do really interesting things these days. So this is something you should really take under consideration, and you do need to invest some time and money, but it will be worth your while in the long run. Okay, next one of the AI would be AI content creation. I know everybody's already used Chat GPT and ask questions, or the popular one of like, tell me a funny joke, what's funny today type of stuff, but that's only scratching the surface of what AI content creation can do. This is one of the most popular features of our website service we have offered in the past 6 months to our clients is machine learning from your website. So what we do is we take ChatGPT features and we integrate it with a database of, let's say, your WordPress website. And if your website is selling made in Hawaii t-shirts, the database starts learning, machine learning starts learning from your past content, what kind of content you like, what kind of wording you use. Do you use a friendly atmosphere, or do you use an informative tone? So it starts learning. So when you want to write content just for a blog or a social media, you can give instructions to your website. It keeps learning and creating better content for you. You can also improve keyword ratios when you're writing a blog to have better hits. And it does this in a smart way, so it's not redundant and it doesn't overdo it either. And also, you can do translation work through content you've created in English. And once again, this has a machine learning component to it. So if you write the blog in English, and let's say it's in an informative tone, but in Japanese, you want it to be a friendly tone. You just have to give it instructions to write the blog in a more friendly tone. Tone is very important, especially when you're looking at different demographics of age, gender, or location. Okay. I'm sorry, this should be 2023 web trends. The multimedia experience is just increasing so much on any website or any tablet or smartphone. So when you're making your website, content is best for text content is always good for getting good SEO, but you want to be having, captivating information on how to grab the attention of your users. I know Hyundai now has a feature where you can buy a car on Amazon. They use this multimedia experience very nicely. You can change the color of the car, rims, the seat color, leather, and so on. And you can actually buy a car full experience on Amazon. Hyundai takes care of everything for you. Okay, next one is completing transaction. This is a very important. A lot of websites, I mean, not a lot, but I still see websites whereas you find what you're looking for, you like it, you like the atmosphere of the website, you like the information, you like the price, and then you want to go purchase it or order in bulk, and there's no place to contact somebody, or there's a link saying, please email me here, or give us a call to make an appointment. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure your website has a complete transaction experience for your user. Okay, this is kind of piggyback offing the multimedia experience, but during COVID, the video marketing just kind of really took off and boomed. So one of the reasons is you can really fine tune the audience you're playing your videos to. So unlike keywords, you don't know what group is typing in a keyword, but video, you can target a specific demographic to advertise more information. Here's an example of the demographics on YouTube. Okay, Facebook has 2.7 billion users, and YouTube has 2.2 billion. Yeah, but the biggest change in YouTube in the past couple of years is the baby boomers, age 50, 65, and 65 years old, have suddenly jumped into watching YouTube in a huge amount, huge increase. And 75% say it's nostalgia. They use it to stay in the know. How-to contents are very, very popular. So even if you're not advertising with YouTube, it's a good place to start. no matter what country you're in, to have your channel in that language. Okay, thank you very much for listening. I hope you have some questions. I would be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you. There is a question, but I'm going to chime in and just also say that I think the videos are extremely important for our Hawaii companies to be able to get the aloha out into the world and the Hawaii-ness of our products with the sunshine and the palm trees and the wind and the sky and the beaches and everything in your background of your videos says so much to the world about your product. I think we have to get more of these videos out there, short videos that talk about the product. And compared to the other social media platforms, video is really universal, right? If you want to go the extra mile and subtitle your videos, fine, but you actually really don't need that much language in your videos when you have a background like Hawaii. I think that our companies need to do a much better job of getting some short videos out there. By short, I mean 30 seconds to a minute. Just I see that as so incredibly helpful, and people all around the world can see those. But if you're targeting a specific market, say Japan, for example, I think it's a fantastic idea. I'll also ask about Line. Kanzo-san, if a Hawaii company wants to start a Line account and post in Japanese, how do they begin with that? How do you start that process?
Oh, okay. So Line is broken into two compartments. There's the free version that most people use, and then there's a business version. And a lot of companies in Japan use it, and it's popular for kind of a quick chat session or a reservation system. So a lot of restaurants use it for bookings, and also they use it for team building as well. So if you have a lot of staff members who are, let's say, driving around town, they need to communicate with each other. A lot of small, mid-sized companies will have their employees use this business line feature where they can communicate with each other.
Okay. One of the questions that came in the Q&A is, where can we find information regarding which social media platforms are more in tune with certain demographics in Japan or in other countries? So, for example, if a user is 25 years old in Japan versus, let's say, Mexico, where could somebody look up that information? Like, which is the best social media platform? I think I'll pre-answer and say it probably has to do a little bit with your product and what is your target market segment. As you mentioned, older people like me are starting to get more into YouTube. And I would say that when I see much younger people, including my kids, they spend an inordinate amount of time on YouTube. It's incredible to me how much kids are watching videos, not just Instagram and what have you, but YouTube is enormously popular. And I do that as well. And I don't spend very much time on Facebook or Instagram anymore. Maybe I did before. And I spend more time on X and YouTube. So I don't think I'm wildly different than most people my age. But how about in Japan, for example? What do you see?
For Japan, to break it up simply, the age group, the 35 and under would be Instagram. Then 35 and above will be Facebook. And the interesting about Facebook in Japan is they're actually increasing numbers in people above 55. So the 55-year-olds old are finally starting to use Facebook, and they're actually using it a lot.
I believe that.
And then there's kind of that gray zone in between, which is like, 40, 45-ish. They're kind of in between Facebook and Instagram.
Interesting.
Yeah, but if you like more information, if you look at my presentation, I do have the source of the data. For the social media, you can visit this site called comnico.jp. And another good one is statista.com. Some of these are premium websites, but if you want to do information, it is worth the information. They have very good data.
Great. Can you go ahead just one slide to the Ryoko slide? Yeah, here. How do you recommend to a company in Hawaii who may not have Japanese language skill internally? How can they maintain a database that has somebody's Romaji name? Like, let's just pick Kanzo Nara, for example, right? And how can they have Kanzo Nara in kanji in their database when they don't read it? They don't even understand what it means. Do you have any simplified way to handle that sort of problem that people would have?
Oh, when it comes to names, it's pretty hard. But I would recommend when you do this, and if you're, let's say you're using a translation tool, instead of doing a word, you make it a sentence. If you give it more information, it'll probably give you a better chance of getting the correct version. So just use a sentence instead of just a word. Did I answer that question correctly?
I think so. I know it's a difficult question, and I've wrestled with it my whole career. With even if you customers are, say, in Eastern Europe and the characters look very Romaji based on a Latin alphabet, there's still lots of accents and things there that are not common to a normal American business English reader. And so how do you maintain a database with the correct spelling in the local language? I think it's a global problem. I was just curious on your opinion on that.
Well, another tool you can supplement is you try putting that into a Google search box and see what the suggestions are. Yeah, that helps out too.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. If you could scroll to the end and show everybody your contact information again. I think in Hawaii, Kanzo is perhaps the most informed on any of this subject with bilingual social media and websites and this sort of thing. He's forgotten more than the rest of us will ever know. So if you have any questions about this in the future, please reach out to him directly. So thanks again, Kanzo. We greatly appreciate having you here today.
Okay, thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu.
So with that, I'd like to jump into our next speaker's topic, which is logistics. International logistics, I'm not going to lie to you, in my opinion, this is one of the biggest problems that exporters from Hawaii have. Sending product internationally. I mean, of course, to the mainland also, but internationally, we're in the most isolated region of the world out here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and trying to ship product to Japan or other parts of the world is not easy or cheap. And there are solutions out there and people who can help you. You're not the first company to do this, and you can learn lessons from people who do it all the time. So with that, I'd like to introduce HPEC board member Peter Stoms from UPS, and we thank him greatly for being here. And he will also have his contact information at the end of his presentation, where you can contact Peter directly and ask him any questions about logistics. And just on this topic, I am planning a logistics day for later in the year, where we're going to bring together a bunch of logistics providers and have presentations and just talk about the overall logistics situation of shipping product internationally. So I don't have a date yet for that, but please stay tuned, and we'll be getting a date out soon on how to do that. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Peter Stoms and thank him greatly for being here and presenting about logistics. Please, Peter.
Thank you, Rob. Can you hear me okay?
Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, everyone. So I'll try to speak clearly and not too congested, but I do appreciate your patience as we work through this presentation together.
You
Thank
sound very,
Rob,
you
for
sound
also-
very clear, no
Yeah,
problem.
good.
Thank you.
That's good. I'm making progress, getting better. So thank you to Rob and the HPEC team for having me here to share with you folks really what UPS is capable of, some of the tools we have, some statistics on consumer purchasing power globally. And we're here to really encourage you to help you grow your top line revenue outside of the US. So you folks can see my slide okay? Can you folks see my slide okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Now that we got that confirmed, this is just really here as a quick snap of the world, the globe. And what this really is emphasizing here is that 95% of the world's consumer purchasing is actually outside of the US. So this is really to encourage you to see the potential marketplaces that you can take your products globally. And obviously UPS is there to help you along the way to, you know, to grow that top line revenue growth. That's why we're all in business, right? So get encouraged and enthusiastic about shipping international. Let's see here, I got the slide a little bit. So expertise and grows to succeed. UPS really has a very large footprint globally. As you're seeing here, we have one of the largest airlines in the world with over 230 jets. We're processing millions of packages a day globally at our major sorting hubs. International operations, daily flights, well over 900. International airports served as well over 300. So we have a very large global presence around the entire globe, over 220 countries and territories again. So basically, if there's a country or territory that you want to go to as a business, there's a very high percentage chance that we're able to get it there in a streamlined fashion. This slide really dives into the service options we have available to you. So keep in mind that this is a presentation on small parcel shipments and movements. This is not for palletized shipments. I specialize in small parcel, non-palletized shipments, which is your typical brown box that is not on a pallet, domestic, international. And what this is really exemplifying is our service levels that we have available to you internationally for export, as well as the time commits that are associated with the services. Something to keep in mind here is Worldwide Saver tends to be the default service that people use out of Hawaii globally because it goes to the most destinations internationally. It is guaranteed in 1 to 3 business days pending normal customs clearance. And we'll get into the importance of how to clear packages proactively in some additional slides that we will review. However, Worldwide Saver tends to be the default service because it delivers in 1 to 3 business days, which is the same as Express. However, it's a little more affordable because the time commitment is by end of business day, not an earlier prior to noon time commitment. Worldwide Expedited, though, is a more affordable service. This is typically 2 to 5 business days pending normal customs clearance. So if you're looking for affordability, Expedited is an option for you, but it does not go to as many countries internationally as Worldwide Saver. However, it does go to most major countries that most people here would be shipping to. So it really depends on your time in transit needs and what you're willing to spend to get your product to the other side of the world in a very timely and efficient manner. One thing I do also want to point out here is that UPS Standard is a export service only available on the mainland, the 48 states. It is a ground international service that moves product north and south of the US to Canada and Mexico. So keep that in mind that Standard is not available out of Hawaii. However, Expedited, Saver, and Express options are available. This goes into a little bit more in depth on those same services we just reviewed, specifically the countries that they can go to. So as you can see again, Saver is the most common with going to 220 different countries and territories on an export basis. 2 columns there, one's for export, one's for import, so keep that in mind. But as you can see, there are various options, and we do go to many, many countries and territories globally. UPS brokerage, something that's unique about UPS that other carriers can't say, is that we have our own brokerage. Our brokerage is one of the biggest in the world. And one of the benefits to a shipper with UPS having their own brokerage is that we keep possession of your package throughout the entire supply chain. We're not handing it off to a third-party broker. This can at times create some confusion or delays in transit. In addition to that, UPS brokerage is well versed and experienced with efficiently processing packages and working with customs in that country that you're trying to move that package into and getting it processed through customs in a very timely and efficient manner. So it's kind of, you could call it basically a one-stop shop with UPS. There is an option if you do have a preferred broker, you can choose a third-party option. That is totally up to you as a shipper, and that is in your control. When you're processing your export shipments, you can make that select. We're going to go over a couple of footprints internationally that UPS has operationally in these countries. And we're just going to take some quick snapshots here. I don't want to spend too much time on these slides. But basically, this is a snapshot of our footprint in Europe. As you can see, it's quite extensive. We have our major hub in Cologne, Germany, that processes significant amounts of export volume going into the European region. And we have approximately 2,000 access points. Access points are important. They're growing rapidly. What they essentially are is if you are a receiver and you're in a location that has high crime, or it's hard to get a delivery to, or there may not be clean access to get it to you without risk of the package being lost or stolen, what you can utilize is an access point. And an access point is a qualified retail outlet that UPS has brought on board as a third-party partner to receive those packages on your behalf. And some of the benefits there is that when a carrier like UPS can't make a delivery, we will make 3 delivery attempts. And after that 3rd delivery attempt, we will send it back. And a return shipment does cost money because we're moving it. So what the access point really does is help to reduce returns and get packages securely delivered on the 1st delivery attempt. So that's really good to keep in mind as well. This is another snapshot of our operational footprint in Asia. We have quite a few key hubs, primarily located on coastal areas for obvious reasons. That tends to be where the airports are and ports are for ocean container movements as well. And we can intertwine those operations on an as-needed basis. But essentially, this is our snapshot of our Asia network. You can see Japan is quite popular as well, with quite a few package operations. They're very dense, and that's to accommodate the density of Japan in certain cities. China, obviously this is kind of zooming in on that snapshot of Asia, but specifically China here. 33 UPS Express branches, 2 airport hubs. It's a it's an intense operation in China. There's no doubt about that. I've dove into it a bit more than this high level, but just know with certainty and confidence that we're able to service all of your packages internationally going to 220 countries and territories. Here's Canada. So from an export standpoint, we'll get into this a little bit with U.S. Commercial Services. We have John Holman, who's also part of the Hawaii Pacific export team. But Canada is oftentimes a first place to try to target your customers based on what your commodity type is. That is important too. But Canada being very close to, obviously, the 48 states, the mainland, and relatively close to Hawaii, all things considered, being that we're the most isolated inhabited landmass on the face of the earth. But Canada is a great starting point for your exports. We have a very strong presence there. I will tell you though, we do, because of the remote areas of Canada, it can get very remote because of how large it is. We do outsource some of our very remote deliveries to third parties to make sure they get delivered in a timely manner. And that tends to be very common in the transportation industry for those very remote locations. So our returns, what another important piece of the supply chain is returns. UPS actually has the most return services available domestically and internationally for shippers to take advantage of. Obviously, we want to reduce returns. We want your consumers or your customers to receive their packages and just absolutely appreciate it. It'll be the right size and the right color and everything they want it to be. But of course, we need to be able to accommodate the customers. Customers have high expectations these days. And one of those expectations is having a robust return options. So we have anything from printing a return label, excuse me, where when you're processing your outbound label, it will also process a return label for you, and that you can include it in your package that goes outbound to your international receiver. We have electronic return labels, so at any point, whether the package has been delivered or is in transit, you can actually issue an electronic return label that is sent via email. And we have web-based labels where you can go onto the shipper's website, and through APIs, we can integrate the ability for a consumer to be very self-sufficient in that they can go to your website and just create a return label on their own and not have to bother you as the shipper for those needs. And then we have the 1 in 3 attempts. 1 in 3 attempts are pickup attempts. Obviously, the more pickup attempts UPS tries, it tends to be a little bit more expensive, but it's not a drastic price difference. But those are the attempts that the driver will make to pick up that return package. And the package is expected to be available and ready for pickup. Let's see. Sorry, my titles of my slides are covered by this menu bar, so I can't really see this title. So UPS Global E-commerce Solutions. We have a variety of front-end technologies that consumers can integrate into their websites to accommodate the shopper's experience internationally. So a couple pain points that we've done a variety of surveys with UPS on international consumers, and the pain points that we came across in those surveys, number one is a consumer doesn't like when they don't know the estimated cost of duties, taxes, and transportation to get that product to their doorstep. When you're processing an international package, you can determine as the shipper if you want UPS to collect duties and taxes upon delivery, or if you want to have it all paid up front. Let me drink some water, one moment. And what we found in our surveys is that it tends to be a little bit of a rude awakening for a consumer when they purchase a product on your website. When it gets delivered, the UPS driver shows up and says, "Hey, you owe us $25 for duties and taxes." And they're like, "Well, I thought I paid for this." And that oftentimes can result in a return and not closing the sale for your business. So this kind of technology that you can integrate upfront into your website that allows you to give an estimated duties and taxes, allows it to get paid upfront. It really allows for no surprises upon delivery and a much better consumer experience for those international shipments. This is kind of just a snapshot of how that technology works. It's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to cruise over this really quickly, but essentially the consumer would visit your site. The nice thing is that there is a currency conversion to whomever the recipient, whatever country they're in, they will convert USD into that recipient's currency. So there's not any guesswork on the currency conversion. The shopping cart itself will display the landed cost, and then the order is completed and then the shipment is sent out. So again, it really helps. And one of the other benefits is that it can convert to local language of that consumer as well. So they're going to get the full experience with the currency conversion the full landed costs, as well as the local language. And it does have fraud protection in there as well, because I will be honest with you, fraud does tend to creep up as a potential risk when you're shipping internationally. And as you can imagine, recourse on fraud internationally is even more difficult than recourse on fraud domestically. So that fraud protection and secure payment option that's integrated into the software is very vital and important. UPS International Welcome Program. I'm a big fan of this because, as Rob was explaining earlier when he was introducing me, international shipping, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not easy at first. And that is another sticking point that UPS uncovered in their surveys when they actually surveyed the shippers. We've surveyed the consumers and we surveyed the shippers to really be able to provide solutions that really assist everybody in this process. And so the UPS International Welcome Program, I'm all about it. I love it. Basically what that means is I will assign you to a representative, and all they do is eat, breathe, and sleep international. And they're literally there to handhold you through your first 12 weeks of shipping internationally, whether it's one package or 100 packages. They're there to help you through that process, and they will literally walk you step by step with processing those international shipments. And it's going to really essentially give you the confidence and that warm fuzzy feeling you're looking for when you're venturing outside the US to grow your business. So I'm a huge fan of this program and I love it. US Commercial Services. I talked about this a little bit in the first slides. John Holman is with HPEC as well. He's a member and he is the top dog here in Hawaii when it comes to US Commercial Services. I have referred some customers to him. One of the things I really like, among many other things that John and US Commercial Services does, is the Gold Key matching program. So as long as I think it's 51% of your product is made in the US, if I'm not mistaken, that they will help you to identify countries and businesses or consumers that are looking for your product type to help you to have a more strategic approach in targeting your customer base and which countries to go to at first.
Yes, that's correct, Peter. And it's 51%, same as the parameters that are put on the HiSTEP program, 51% US made. I would also add that the Gold Key service that the US Commercial Service does in the foreign markets costs approximately $900 per market. However, some of those costs are able to be offset by the HiSTEP program if you're approved for that company assistance. So it's a great program. You're correct.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that additional insight. Those are important points. UPS paperless invoice. This is a patented technology by UPS. When we conducted our surveys amongst consumers and shippers, essentially what UPS found out was the traditional way of including your commercial invoice on your export shipments was very inefficient and archaic. So let me explain to you what that used to look like. So when you're processing an international shipment, essentially what's going to happen when you get let me say that the label on the left here, where it says UPS Saver, that's your PLD label, which is your package level detail. So typically what used to happen in the past is when that label prints out, 3 hard copies of your commercial invoice will print out as well. Each one of those has to be signed and dated, and those hard copies are then put in a pouch that is stuck to the side of your box. I know all of you are thinking, boy, that sounds archaic, something like probably out of the 50s or 60s. Believe it or not, that's been around for a long time. And what UPS realized was that along the points in the supply chain, representatives of UPS, customs, brokerage are going to take out one of those copies of that hard copy commercial invoice. And what was happening is the pouches were getting ripped off in transit. Somebody would take more than one copy of that commercial invoice. And what that results in is a customs hold. Because essentially your commercial invoice, I would compare it basically to kind of like your passport when one of us wants to travel internationally. Without a commercial invoice, customs is blind to what the commodity is, what it's made out of, what it's used for, how many units there are, and that will create a delay that nobody wants to deal with. Customs delays, let's be honest, customs is there as a revenue generator for that country, and they're there to assign duties and taxes. And if there's no commercial invoice, you're gonna get a hold, and then we're communicating with another country that is not on our, obviously, our time zones, and it creates multi-day delays. So UPS came up with a solution. What's that solution? UPS paperless invoice. So basically what's happening is that label you see on the right is now your paperless invoice. And that gets stuck on the box right next door to your PLD label. There's no more pouch on the side of the box. There's no more 3 hard copies of commercial invoices in a pouch on the side of the box. All of that, pardon the description, that nonsense is eliminated, because now you have a barcode that contains all of that information. And this is unique to UPS. This is a great benefit. So what happens is really cool. So when the driver picks up that package here in Hawaii and they scan your PLD label, they're going to also scan the second label, which is your paperless invoice. That information is then uploaded to our servers and beamed via satellite, or however they do it, to that destination country's customs. So before your package even takes off on our jet in Hawaii, customs already knows what it is, what it's made out of, what it's used for, how many units, commodity description, all that good stuff. So when that package shows up in customs, it walks on through, it's extremely efficient and timely, and gets delivered. And you're going to see those quick time in transit commitments of those 1 to 3 or 2 to 5 business day time in transit commitments, which is what those service commitments are internationally. Again, the guarantee doesn't apply. The time in transit guarantee does not apply if the customs decides to hold your package, because that's out of our control. But then again, that shows the importance of having UPS paperless invoice in place. Quantum View Manage, one moment, please. Quantum View Manage is a tracking tool. So really, obviously, what I'm talking about a lot here are tools. I describe Quantum View Manage as basically, it's kind of like the dashboard of your car. It is a login through ups.com that's associated through your account number. So it is and it's based on date range that you can contrast or expand depending on what you're looking for. But it'll have all your tracking numbers based on your search criteria, and it'll let you know if it's manifested labels in transit, if there's been an exception like a customs hold, what that exception is for, what additional paperwork is needed, that you can submit it through Quantum View Manage. It'll let you know when your package is out for delivery and when it's been delivered. So it's basically, instead of having to, for instance, look up your PO numbers, and then look up a tracking number that's associated with your PO for your international shipment, and then typing that tracking number into ups.com, it's just a simple login. It gives you everything you need on your supply chain and all your packages based on that search criteria. So again, another tool that's very helpful for international shippers. It's free also. So is paperless invoice, both free. Tradability. So if you're an international shipper and you're thinking about going international, even whether you decide to go with UPS or somebody else, I recommend using tradability. Write that word down. It's not an English word. They just decided to make it up, but it does exist on ups.com. And the nice thing with UPS tradability is that it allows you to be proactive and do the upfront work for your commodity type that you're trying to get to the other side of the world. So what do I mean by that? So essentially, there is a universal language that's used with all customs globally, and that's an HTS code, also known as a harmonized tariff code. And that harmonized tariff code, there is literally a code for every single commodity type out there in the world, more or less. And if you can't find your exact code, if you have some kind of extremely unique product, then you're going to just want to use one that is as close as possible. That harmonized tariff code or HGS code has to be included when you're processing your shipment as a commercial invoice, because it then assists and allows customs to know what the duties and taxes are that they need to assess on that commodity type so that they can release it and allow it to enter their country. They also provide estimated landed costs for shipments on UPS.com through Tradeability. And there also are restricted countries that we just don't do business with because either there may be a war going on or they're just known as a very corrupt country politically. Sometimes those things exist in the world as well. But nonetheless, Tradeability is your best friend when it comes to identifying and being proactive with your commodity types that you're going to be shipping and making sure you know those harmonized tariff codes. And you can do the additional research as well to know an estimate on landed costs and whatnot, depending on how sophisticated you want to make your website. Excuse me. With that said, I appreciate your time and I appreciate the opportunity. There's my email if you folks have any additional questions after this presentation. But I do want to, again, express my appreciation of your time and the opportunity and of possibly shipping internationally with UPS. We're definitely here for you. We appreciate you.
Great presentation. Thank you, Peter. I use Tradeability all the time. You're right, it's a great thing. I also like the paperless invoices that UPS has moved to, and that's extremely helpful for everybody. So if anybody has questions for Peter about the logistics process, moving product internationally, you see his email address here. Please contact him. And again, I'll be sending around PDF versions of these presentations, so you'll be able to access his contact information later. Thanks again, Peter. Wonderful.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate the opportunity.
Our next presentation is legal, and we'll discuss intellectual property and trademarking to a certain degree. It's with Seth Reese of Lex IP and Watanabe Ing. Seth is our go-to guy for intellectual property topics, and we'll be having another webinar specific to intellectual property later in the year with Seth. But I'd like to have him just discuss a little bit general activities that are involved in legal aspects for exporters. But of course, as one of Hawaii's top IP people, he will certainly be able to discuss that as well. So Seth, thank you very much for being here. We always love having you, and please proceed.
Hey, thanks. Can everybody hear me okay?
Very clearly, we can see your presentation as well.
Okay, good. That's the biggest challenge for me. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about non-IP legal considerations. I am not a international trade lawyer, but I have a little background, so I can talk about those few issues, and then we'll talk about IP and trademark more in detail. So the few areas I'll talk about that are not IP that involve legal issues that come up in international sales and export would be the contracting, export licenses and customs, and I think the UPS people can help you through the customs part. Getting paid, tax treaties, and Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is a little known law that can come back and bite you if you're not careful. Contracting, there's something, I don't, if you guys do a lot of work with sales domestically, there's something called the Sale of Goods Act, which is a uniform act, and if you don't have a clause in your contract that says what state law applies, then the Sale of Goods Act, UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, will kick in. It's kind of like a default law. Well, internationally, there's something called the Convention on the International Sales of Goods. So that's something that will kick in if you don't say anything in your contract about the law of which country applies. Generally, we don't like this because it's a little unpredictable for us. And so, if you have the control of the negotiations or a say in the negotiations, you want to put your own choice of law. And usually that'll be Hawaii and the United States, mostly because we want to have some predictability about what law will apply and what the law will say. If you don't say it, you might find a law of a foreign country applies. And the laws of a foreign country, sometimes they mirror ours and sometimes they do not, but there's going to be obviously a lot more guesswork if local law isn't applied. Venue, again, if you have to litigate a dispute in a foreign country, it's going to be more expensive and less predictable. If you can have the venue in Hawaii for your disputes, and a lot of times the cost of litigation is actually lower in foreign countries because America is one of the highest cost countries for disputes, but you can always put in an arbitration or a mediation clause in your contract so that, try to keep the costs down, try to keep the dispute at home. This is going to be a point of negotiation, so you won't always get what you want, but you should at least try. When you're doing a contract, you're going to want it to be in English and have local law apply, as I said, but not every provision is going to be enforceable and legal under the laws of a foreign country. So if you can budget it, and again, it's going to be a budget item, but sometimes it's not expensive. We do a lot with Japan, and we have foreign counsel review licenses in Japan, and sometimes we find it's only $1,000 or $2,000, which is generally budgetable, and they review it. And it depends who you select. So obviously you can get a lot more expensive with certain firms, but there are firms out there that are good that will do it fairly inexpensively, and they'll look for provisions that will just be unenforceable in the laws of their country. So one area in Japan is, we like to put in that if they invent something that adds to our intellectual property, then we own it. That doesn't work in Japan. It doesn't fly. And so a provision like that he needs to be modified a bit to be legal in Japan. So even if you say Hawaii laws apply and it's in English and all that, if you have a provision that's against public policy in another country, then it just won't work. You won't be able to enforce it. So if you can budget it, a review of your contract by foreign counsel is a good idea. And a lot of times it'll just mean that they say it works. It's not offensive, and or they'll tweak a provision in a way that's not a problem. Language, we like to use English as a language. Sometimes we will have it translated for the foreign partner, so that they at least can't say they didn't understand it. Currency provisions are also interesting. A lot of times they're, in IP area, we do royalties, but we generally will say that foreign currencies are converted to US dollars in accordance with the, a spot rate that's published in the New York Times or some financial papers, just so there's clarity in terms of how the conversion gets done, because as we all know, people can pick different conversion rates depending on where they're coming from. Export licenses. Well, this is interesting. This is what you need to send things out. Most things that you'll be exporting will not require a license, but a few things do. And there's probably specialists on the mainland who can tell you more about this, but generally, if you have technology, software, and inventions, you need to worry about an export license. If you have weapons of mass destruction, medical devices, they all may need an export license, but most things that you'll export do not. So there are web pages, US government web pages, where you can read through and to see if you may need a license. We do a lot of patent filings, and when we do a patent filing for an invention, we automatically get a license or get told that we can't export it because the Department of Defense has some interest in the invention. That's rare. That's in my years of practice, it's only happened to me once, and And after a few months, the Department of Defense was no longer interested. And so then you get an export license for your invention. Again, most of what you guys have probably won't be implicate an export license, but you do need to make sure, because it can be a violation of federal law and it can be serious. Customs is what the countries on the other side require. If you're using shippers and freight forwarders, they will oftentimes troubleshoot this for you. I think the presentation by UPS is very helpful in that respect, because they can handle this aspect for you. Other shippers may as well. If you get into a fix, then you have to hire a customs lawyer. So, and if you're shipping to a foreign country, then you're going to have to hire the customs lawyer in that foreign country. Getting paid, again, this is not my area of expertise, but some countries make it difficult to get money out, so you have to have a plan for that. Tax treaties oftentimes kick in when we do license agreements with Japan. Japan needs documentation signed, so they're not paying double taxation at their level, and so you have to be prepared to deal with the documentation so that whoever is entitled to a tax credit for double taxation will get it. So in other words, anticipate that you will be filling out paperwork in order to enable the party that is burdened by taxes to take advantage of the relevant tax treaty. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Well, this is interesting. It's a U.S. Federal law that prevents people from bribing foreign governments. And you might think, well, that could never happen to you. But in fact, if you have a distributorship agreement or a sales agent in a foreign country, and they engage in practices that might be normal in that country, by making gifts to government officials to help sales, that can implicate this act. So it's something to be aware of if you do have a relationship with somebody in a foreign country of that nature. You can include in your distributor contract provisions that say that they will not do such things. So if they do it, you can at least point to the provision in the contract saying that's not something you endorsed. In fact, you prohibited it, and distance yourself from any conduct like that. Okay, so now we're going to move into the area that I'm most familiar with is intellectual property. And there's 4 general types of intellectual property. I'm going to spend most of my time in trademarks because that's what typically is involved in when you're doing exports. But the other areas of intellectual property can be implicated. The patents are inventions. They're protected country by country. If you have a product that is protected by a patent and you export it, if the country that you're exporting to that patent is not also protected in that country, then it can be copied legally. It can be copied legally. So you want to look into whether the patent is also protected in the country you're shipping to. There's 2 ways of getting patent protection in foreign countries. You can file domestically, which is country by country. You can file through a patent cooperation treaty, which takes the first step of the patent process centralized. So you file one application in how many hundreds of countries that you're interested in protecting. But at the end of the day, you have to file the last piece of the application in the country by country, and it's very expensive. So, budgets for international patenting typically run $50,000 to several $100,000. And again, it's not typical, and you have to do it at the get-go. You have to do it before you release your product. You can't file patents after the product's been out on the market and get foreign protection. Copyrights. Nice thing about copyrights is they're automatic. They're automatic everywhere. There's registration apparatus in 2 countries, the U.S. and Philippines. Philippines tends to copy our IP laws, but that's just for enhanced damages in the U.S. Even in the U.S., copyright is automatic. There's 2 copyright conventions treaties that are universally adopted. The important one now is the Berne Convention. It took the U.S. 100 years to decide to join that one. Once we joined the UCC, which is the older convention for the U.S., is kind of ignored because the Berne Convention gives better protection. Basically, what it says is if you're a member of the treaty, your copyrighted works gets the same quality and quantity of protection in a foreign country than the works of the nationals in the foreign country. So if you have a copyrighted work and you go to Japan, your copyrighted work is protected in Japan to the same degree as a Japanese work is. And because it's automatic, it's there. So you don't have to do anything. You just have to enforce it. And if you find that your copyrighted work, which is like artwork, sculpture, music, is being ripped off in a foreign country, then all you have to do is find an attorney in the foreign country to enforce it. And as we know, certain foreign country piracy is very, very common. So, you know, music copyright gets ripped off in China and other countries at a very high rate. But these countries also enforce IP protection. It's just that the efficacy of enforcement is limited. In other words, you spend money and the amount of enforcement you get is relatively low relative to other countries, but the enforcement is available. Trade secrets are things that you keep secret that have a value. The Coca-Cola formula is the classic example. These are protected at state levels and on the federal level through the Economic Espionage Act of 1996. If you have a trade secret and it gets ripped off in a foreign country, and you have a relationship, a contractual relationship with the person who's ripping the trade secret off, you would have jurisdiction over that company under federal law. The ability to protect under foreign law would depend on foreign laws, and that's beyond the scope of my knowledge, but I do imagine that certain countries, and maybe most countries, have some level of protection for trade secrets. Trademarks. This is what's mostly of concern to exporters because almost all goods are associated with a trademark. Trademarks bring goodwill, and in some circumstances in some countries you cannot sell without showing you own a trademark. They're indicator of source and origin. They're designs and words and sometimes smells and sounds. The name of companies sometimes function as trademarks and service marks, and they protect you against other people impersonating you, but they also protect consumers because consumers want genuine goods and not fake goods. Registering is the universal way of acquiring trademark rights. In the United States and other Commonwealth countries, I just got back from New Zealand and Australia, and so they would be examples of countries that also protect trademarks as a result of use, common law rights. But those are limited, and so the general rule when you're worried about foreign protection for trademarks is that you have to register. You have to register first. Somebody can jump the gun and register your mark and prevent you from using your mark in a foreign country. That's true in most foreign countries. There's only 2 exceptions to this, famous and well-known marks. There's a Paris Convention of 18 something that says that if a mark is sufficiently famous or well-known, then other people can't register it if they don't have a relationship with the true owner. The other interesting exception, it also comes from the Paris Convention. It's something to know because this happens pretty often, and it's happened to our clients in Korea. If you have a distributor or an agent in a foreign country and they decide they're going to register your mark in their name, usually without telling you. If they tell you, tell them not to and do it yourself. It'll cost you a little money, but don't let them do it for you, because that's the best way to lose something. But in any case, occasionally they'll get the idea that they'll register your mark, and then you can no longer fire them as a distributor because they own the mark and you don't in the foreign country. And so in the case in Korea, you know, we had an action against the Korean agent distributor under this Paris Convention, because the Paris Convention protects against rip-offs by your agent. But at the end of the day, the settlement was cheaper than finishing the lawsuit. So we paid our distributor a bunch to get our mark back and move to the distributor we wanted to use. But the big rule to remember here is, you know, file before you think about doing business in a foreign country. File your trademarks there. It's not going to cost a lot, and it's going to save a lot of grief to prevent somebody else from doing it first. And not all marks will be available. You know, there are a lot of people have very common words as marks, and if you go to a foreign country, you might find somebody already has it. That's not because they're copying you. That's simply because there's a lot of registrations, and you may have to think about workarounds. How to register marks in foreign countries. There's several levels of registrations in the United States. We register by state. Interestingly, in Italy, you know, Italy used to be a conglomeration of monarchs, I guess, before 18-something, when it became a nation. And so they still have a trademark system where you can register separately and in each regional area of Italy, but you can also register nationally. And typically that's what you will be doing. You won't be registering state by state or province by province. There are trademark unions. The EU has 27 nation states, and you can file one trademark application and get registered in all the members. And this is very, very helpful and very efficient and inexpensive, and we do that on a regular basis for our clients. Well, one thing to remember, though, is Switzerland, Norway, and Malta are not members of the EU convention. They are members of the EU, or maybe Switzerland is not. But so if you really want to cover everything in Europe, you have to file those 3 countries separately. Benelux is an old trademark union that's some of the countries in the EU. If you do the EU, you'll cover them, so you don't have to do Benelux separately. And there is a African trademark union as well, covering the French-speaking African countries. I've never filed into there, but it is available. So here's the bit about treaties. So treaties can help you get protection in foreign countries, but they don't themselves provide the protection. You have to file in each country directly or through a trademark treaty. There's not a global trademark registration. So you can file individually in countries through foreign trademark firms. We have relationships, for example, with firms in most countries of the world. We've worked with them for a long time, so we found people we like to work with, usually smaller firms, because we get better service. Since our clients aren't huge, we tend to get better treatment from small firms that are also offer quality service for fair prices. It's fairly competitive, so the pricing is not bad these days. When you file a national application, you have to renew it, maintain it, usually at 10-year intervals, and you have to do that at the national level. Then there's something called the Madrid Protocol, which came in the maybe 20 years ago. It kind of revolutionized the ability to file international applications, because now I can file an application in up to 130 countries in the world from my desktop, and at a very reduced price compared to filing a national application through foreign counsel in individual countries. It requires having a US application or registration, which is usually not a problem because most of my clients who want foreign protection will also need a US application or registration. Again, I can file it from my desktop in a couple of hours, and we don't need to hire foreign counsel unless there's an objection by a country, and then we do, and that does happen sometimes. So it's a central application filed with an organization. It's a UN organization known as WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. We file it, and then we designate what countries want protection in. We can also do the designation down the road later, so we can add countries to a registration. And when it's time to renew, we file the renewal centrally with the same organization in Geneva and pay one fee, and it gets renewed in all countries in which there is protection for the mark. So it's an extremely useful convention. It reduces getting protection significantly, especially if you want. I guess the general rule is more than, if you're going to file for protection in more than 2 countries, that's going to save you money. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of times that marks aren't available in other countries, and we need to find workarounds. And when that happens, we usually go directly to foreign counsel for assistance in workarounds. The workarounds in Asia sometimes consist of, translating marks into local alphabets. They're, generally good foreign counsel have good ideas for workarounds. And this happens mostly in Asian countries. Interestingly, Asian countries, they search marks and object a lot. In European countries, they search marks but they don't object based on similarity to other registrations. In Europe, it is the registrant of a similar registration that has the burden of objecting. It's a different system. The Asia system is more like what we have in the US, where if you file on a mark and there's a similar mark already registered or pending, then the examiner will refuse it and make us argue. That's what happens in Asia. And oftentimes in Asian countries, particularly China, they're very strict, and they have a lot of brands registered. So getting things registered is more of a challenge. But there are a lot of workarounds, and good foreign counsel is really the key to finding a solution in those cases. Okay, so enforcement, there are cease and desist letters. You can register with Border Control if you have a trademark or a patent, and there's contested proceedings. Cease and desist letters, we've written some, but basically if you write a letter to a foreign country and you're a US attorney, it's not generally taken too seriously because they know that you can't do anything in their country. So it's good to have foreign counsel do the letter for you, or take a letter that we've prepared and revise it and issue it by them. Sometimes it'll work. Interestingly, we think of Asia being difficult, but India and South America are extremely litigious when it comes to trademark registrations and infringement. So those countries tend to like to fight about marks for whatever reason. Border control, I think most countries have this. It can prevent infringing items to come in. You do have to work with foreign counsel, because foreign counsel will work with the border agents. In the United States, we can, for example, register a trademark or a patent with our border control, and they will look for infringing items that may be coming in. It's the same thing that you'll want to happen when you're exporting into an area. If you have a registered trademark or patent, and or copyright, and you're worried about infringing goods entering that country. Contested proceedings, this is when you seek to cancel or oppose somebody else's registration in a foreign country. And infringement lawsuits, that's a step up in terms of expense. again, we constantly hear that piracy is very a huge problem in certain countries, and that is true. But that doesn't mean the countries don't have enforcement machinery. They do, and courts, for example, in China regularly enforce IP for large brands as well as small brands. The problem is that not that you can't get a judgment and win a lot of money, but that getting rid of the small infringements that are happening, it's difficult to do that efficiently. So let's see, and my last slide is watch out for bullshit. Sorry, but bogus registrations. Once you apply for a trademark, you'll get a lot of fraudulent solicitations. Oops. All right. You'll get solicitations in the mail saying, please pay for this if you don't want to lose your trademark, or pay for this if you want your trademark published all over the world. And they're mostly bogus or not of no value entirely. I just got one on the state level. I just got one the other day. If you have a corporation or an LLC or a partnership in Hawaii, you have to file an annual return, and somebody is mailing us a solicitation telling us that we need to pay them $1,000 to do this, so they'll do it for us, and they don't tell us that they're not official, that they're just a private company trying to make money. Once you file trademarks, you'll get a lot of those things, and you have to be very, very careful not to pay bogus companies. I've been doing this for years, and I still have clients who just informed me that they paid somebody $1,000 for the trademark I filed for them, and even though we have form letters that go out telling them not to, so you need to be vigilant. And I guess the final slide is that this was not intended to be legal advice. Every case is case specific, and the details might suggest an answer different than the general rules that I provided. So thanks for your attention. I don't know if I ended on time, but I'm available for questions, and you can also email me for any follow-up.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Seth. Your presentations are always extremely enlightening, and I think very important. You touched upon that one Korean case, but I've heard of many Hawaiian companies that go into Japan and Korea and elsewhere and are a bit naive about the trademarking process, and they wind up with their local agent or distributor filing locally for the trademark, and then the local agent owns it, and later the relationship sours, and our Hawaii companies fighting to get back that trademark.
So what the interesting thing that people don't tell you is there is a provision in the Paris Convention just for that situation, and so there is a legal ground to get that back. And if you just give up too quickly and don't retain quality foreign counsel, you will have no leverage. But in fact, you do have leverage. So
Great.
It's important not to give up too quick.
I have some concern that some of our Hawaii companies, when they start thinking about this topic of legal and international legal activities, that their eyes just sort of glaze over, and they're very concerned about going down that road and the costs involved, and they're just not familiar with it. But I strongly recommend to our companies to contact somebody like Seth to make sure that your trademarks are set up before you start to go internationally. In fact, we have one question that was typed in, Seth, and I'll read it verbatim. For those business owners who currently sell locally and are interested in protecting their product, how does the referral process work to receive your Seth's guidance?
Okay, well, I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, feel free to email us and tell us what you need, and we'll tell you what we can do and give you a budget. You know, the costs vary a lot, but you know, it's interesting because a lot of startups, they just, you know, they just ignore this piece because it is an extra cost. But the cost can be as low as 2,000 to get some basic protection. That can go a long way, and of course it can get more expensive from there. But you know, we can protect a mark in all of Europe and a handful of Asian countries for less than 10,000. Not in every case, but in many cases, because it'll depend a lot on the mark and what's already registered in those countries. But you know, it's not always going to cost a huge amount. Sometimes we can do it efficiently.
Do free
So-
trade agreements mean anything in this regard? So for example, if we have USMCA with Mexico and Canada, does that make protecting IP easier in those markets?
No. No, I've never, you know, I've done a lot of work with Canada and Mexico. So the IP system works the same. It does, free trade doesn't affect it. It may affect an enforcement action. So if you're actually suing, there may be some aspect of the lawsuit. You might have an additional claim under that. I'm not sure. I think I'd have to think about that. But in terms of just filing and getting registrations, no, it's pretty much identical throughout the world. Canada has, you know, Canada and Mexico both have their, every country does things a little bit differently. So Canada recently revised its registration laws substantially, and it's now easier to get registrations in Canada, easier to get, you know, and you can get it on more bases. Mexico tends to be a little bit litigious in terms of, you know, the amount of infighting that you might have to go through. So they're a little bit like South America and India in that way. So they're all a little bit different. But yeah, free trade has to do with other aspects of trade, not the IP specifically.
All right, I'll just ask one final question. So as you probably know by now, when most of our companies in Hawaii hear the word export, it comes in, gets processed, and it gets word associated with Japan. So if you were a small Hawaii company who has been selling product locally, you've had some feelers out in the Japanese market, maybe you've attended the Tokyo International Gift Show and you really are thinking of expanding more into the Japanese market, putting more effort into spending time in Japan, what have you. What is the first thing that they should do regarding intellectual property and trademarking? Let's just say this is a skincare company or a jewelry maker here locally. What do you recommend that they should do tomorrow regarding their IP, Japan specific?
Yeah, so I just a trademark registration in Japan. Again, it's typically you're going to have a U.S. registration or application, and then just piggyback a Japan registration on that. If you think you're doing multiple countries thereafter, you might do the international registration through Madrid and extend to Japan. Otherwise, you know, we would just go through Japan Council and have them file.
Okay. And how long does that typically take? If a company called you tomorrow and said, Seth, this is our plan, we're going to Japan, maybe Korea and Taiwan later in 2026 or something, you know, getting these things done, how long does that take?
So you know, depending on how hard it is to get the information from the client. So, you know, sometimes it's easy because the client has a brand, it's clear, there's no conflicts, we just file. Other times it's a little more complicated. So we can file in a day, or if we have to get more information from the client in a few days, that's to file the US. Once you have a US filed application, you get 6 months to file in another country, and and claim priority on your US application. So let's say we file tomorrow a US application. You'd have 6 minutes to sit around and figure out what other countries you want and get that same filing date of tomorrow for that foreign country. So we could take our time after that first filing, and still get tomorrow's date. So Japan, if I have foreign counsel prepare something, they'll usually do it within a week. I can file my international application during that 6 months period and get tomorrow's filing date. So it's really a matter of figuring out what the mark is that you want to protect, and probably we would want to have a look at Japan and the other countries to see if there's anything too similar on their database to make, we don't want to file an application that's going to die. So we would want to look at it. So that can all happen in a couple of days.
Great. Okay, with that, let's close it out with Seth, and thank you so much. It's always fantastic to hear from you, and we'll look forward to scheduling a separate webinar later this year that talks about intellectual property with Seth. So thanks again.
Okay,
and
I'm not sure how to stop sharing.
Oh,
can you do that on your side?
let's see. Well, I think the next speaker, it's a good segue to our next speaker from Central Pacific Bank is Demini Kihei, and he's going to talk about export finance related topics. And I believe when he starts sharing his screen, then Seth, your presentation will
There we go.
Will go away. Demini, please. And while you're doing that, I'd like to thank, we have a new board member on the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, Susan Utsugi from CPB. And she highly recommended Demini to talk today on the export finance topic. So thanks to Susan for that. And Demini, we're thrilled to have you here. We love having export finance speakers. Audience, if you go to our YouTube archive, I pointed out towards the beginning, we have some information there on EXIM, the Export-Import Bank, and how you can use their credit insurance, as well as some information about SBA International. And there's plenty of information there, but Demini can also talk to that slightly. Are you ready to share your screen?
Yes, thank you. Let's see. One second.
Sure.
Can you see it? Can you folks see my
not
screen?
yet. If you need to, I can share it from my side and you can just tell me when to forward the slides.
Okay.
Oh, no, I see action. There it goes. I can see your slide.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but yes, my name is Demini Kihei, and I'm with Central Pacific Bank. And just a brief background on myself and CPB. I've been in banking for nearly 30 years, in business banking, commercial banking. I've literally dealt with not 100, but maybe hundreds of different organizations, businesses, all types, professionals, manufacturers, distributors. So working with small business is a is a personal passion of mine. And with Central Pacific, their background, they were formed in 1954, 70 years ago. So we just celebrated its 70th birthday. But they were founded by very unique, very resilient individuals from the 442nd Regiment, the 100th Battalion, American Japanese veterans. But very, the words inclusive, equality, they wanted to provide others who didn't have the opportunities that other folks had. They wanted to provide those who didn't have a voice, access to resources, knowledge, education from a financial end. And that's what we do. That's what we're doing here for you today. Actually, I also wanted to commend a lot of our small business owners and those who do export. Without you folks taking risks and us supporting you, wouldn't have us bankers wouldn't have a job. But just wanted to end that with letting you know that Central Pacific was the top SBA lender in the state. A lot of experience, a lot of background dealing with the Small Business Administration. They provided the most PPP loans to small businesses during a time when many businesses needed it. And they were just named to the 2024 list of America's best regional banks and credit unions by Newsweek. So with Susan Utsugi's guidance, I'm actually working on developing and training a SBA professionals team made up of several bankers in our over at CPB, but we don't like to be looked at as bankers. We don't like to be portrayed as just financial, maybe pencil pushers or just focused on the numbers, but we try to emphasize a mentality of becoming mentors, teachers, and guides for our small business owners. We strive to become knowledgeable and experienced and understanding and empathetic. Many times you'll see that that's what you need. That's what small business owners need. They need someone knowledgeable, someone understandable, someone who can make connections, someone who can provide guidance and who has the patience to teach and show you what's possible, to empower, encourage, and educate you for you to succeed. Because again, it's you folks are small business owners who are out there making a difference and building our economy. So we're there to help not only provide you the resources, but the knowledge, the awareness, the education, and the mentorship. So you could look at us mainly as advisors. We also provide, just to end the note, we also provide awareness and resources via the materials that we've got access to materials from many industries, hundreds, thousands of materials that we could target. And that could save you sometimes, or supplement your searches online with one-on-one brainstorming or discussion on what fields or what your projects are. Also, us folks in the banks, we're extremely connected. We're involved on boards. We're involved with schools. We're involved with nonprofits, military, professionals, CPAs, attorneys like Mr. Reese, and our reach and our connections aren't just confined to Oahu. It's throughout the state, throughout the islands. We've got connections nationally. So what I'll do at times is if I can't find answers locally, or if folks need access to friends or professional colleagues on the mainland, I'll make those connections, or we'll make those connections. That's what that's what a understanding, knowledgeable, effective guide, mentor, and teacher does for their clients, for their small business friends. So it's critical. I bolded that at the bottom of this spreadsheet, or I'm sorry, this PowerPoint, that having a knowledgeable partner with a mentor, teacher, guide mindset is it's critical. It's invaluable. You need someone who cares to help guide you through the complexity that's involved with exporting your product. Let's flip this. What you need to begin your exporting adventure. So in this part, this goes to the loan packaging. What is involved in the loan packaging, and what's so very important is your exporting strategy. Think of it as your business plan, but with a laser focus on your exporting strategy. What this helps to do is map out why you're getting into exporting, what's involved in your exporting project, what is the product that you're exporting, what do you know, what's involved in, or how can you convey to the banker, or how can you convey to the financial advisor that this is that you're the expert, that you know what you're doing when you dive into exporting, because exporting can be it could be pretty complex. So you must be your exporting strategy. I recommend documenting it. I've seen some strategies where there may be 3 or 4 pages. I've seen some that are just extensive, maybe 15, 20 pages or more. But as long as you get let us know that you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it, you demonstrate your expertise, you know about your product, you know where your products, you know the market that you're targeting, you know the costs involved, and you don't do it yourself. You've got your team. It really takes a village for this to happen. It's good to bring in your other advisors, your attorney, your CPA, the banker. Bring in small business administration, your advisor there, small business development center. Those involved who can consult and give you advice to help you put together this export strategy and help you refine it. So when it's time to submit your loan package and you've got a clear, concise, laser-focused plan, it makes the process that much easier. The guesswork between banker and client the gap is lessened. Let's see. So must be flexible and must be a flexible and easily understandable document that maps out your product scope and specs. So you have to know what your product is, what it's made up of, its specs. The next slide will explain that a few steps forward, because there's costs involved in your product, and understanding that is essential. The transaction options, what sort of transactions are you going to be involved in order to collect the monies once you ship your product, or you send your product. The financing options available, such as Export Express, SBA, those financing options that the bank provides. Social media plan, if applicable, but listening to Mr. Nara's presentation, a social media plan is essential. And who are your COIs, your centers of influence, and your critical partners? And that goes back to Small Business Administration, Small Business Development Center, those partners. There's much more organization, your chamber partners, your business groups, other banks, plenty of centers of influence, but preferably Central Pacific Bank. We're a very involved bank in this area. So still staying on the exporting strategy, the product scope and specs. So it goes, a good example of that is your banker is going to ask, what is your cost of goods? What is the cost of the item or the service that you're providing? So for example, can you convey to the banker what your packaging and labeling costs are? Can you itemize your marketing costs or your distribution costs or your commissions costs? What sort of fees are involved with the bank or with an attorney or with translation fees or shipping, insurance, or currency fluctuations? Being able to map that out and itemize your cost of good it shows their expertise, it shows your experience, and that's what the bank is going to be looking at. Let's look at the product itself. Can you convey what the market demand for your product is? What sort of target or what sort of customer are you targeting? What is the customer profile? Can you profile or target or describe who your customers are going to be? Can you document that? And I'll finish it with Porter's 5 forces. That's a good concept to look up. It's a good model. It talks about competition. What are the barriers to entry for your product? What is the supplier and buyer power? What sort of influence does the supplier have on the success of your business, or that the buyer has? What's its influence? Threat of substitutes. What substitutes do you feel exist in the market that you're looking to penetrate? And who are your competitors? Threats from competition. That has to be mapped out and discussed with your banker. But looking at the exporting strategy, it may seem overwhelming to do it alone. But that's where a good banker, with again, a mentoring, an advising, and educating, and a guide can help you put this together, can give you that guidance, can give you that, based on their experience, can help you refine the strategy. So it takes a lot of communication and a lot of letting a banker know that if you don't understand something or you need help with something, bring them in, because these bankers, bankers like me, or guides like me, we've got the connections. If we don't know the answer, then we do know someone who has the answer. And our mission, our purpose is to help you succeed. Again, going back to the exporting strategy, know the different types of transaction options. Receiving payment in advance, cash. Not too many buyers are willing to do that, to pay up front. They want some protection, so they want to minimize the risk on their end. Credit cards. Is a buyer willing to pay with credit card? But again, while for the seller, it's for the exporter, it's an easy access to money. Again, the reality with that is or the probability of that as a viable transaction option is iffy. You've got wire transfers, understanding how letters of credit come into play. Opening an account or consignment sales. These are types of transaction options that a good mentor or teacher guide can discuss when we're putting together your exporting strategy. And understanding the impact of foreign exchange. I believe Mr. Reese touched on that. His rates may vary daily. And at the bank, we run into many challenges because sometimes the funds aren't specified on how money should be sent. So again, the exporting strategy, it's really a critical, living, flexible document that's going to change as you evolve through communication with your banker, with your mentor. It's going to change. It's going to be refined. The more knowledge you have, the more that's shared, and the more resources you bring in, the document must be flexible, the strategy must be able to, it has to evolve along with your learning. But I'll move to the bank financing, the loan package. Every bank, including Central Pacific Bank, loan application, completing that loan application. So banks, we provide a loan application, and for us, it's completing the fundamental information. What I've seen with a lot of business owners is it could be complex, but that's where a good mentor comes in to help guide you through completing the application. The business plan or export strategy, as well as well thought out projections. You may put projections for 1 year. Generally, we want 3 years out on a monthly basis, just to see how you project your cash inflows and outflows. However, it could be complicated, or it could be a little bit overwhelming. That's where we bring in our partners. We've got resources that could help guide you through completing these projections, in helping you understand what are the components involved, and simplifying it. And that's what I'm always going to encourage coming to the banker. That relationship is, again, just very, very important. Organizational documents. Are you a limited liability company or a subchapter S corporation? Or even a sole proprietorship? Or maybe you haven't thought about that yet. Good to do research, but also get advice from your banker. Generally, I see a lot of LLCs, but they're taxed as a subchapter S. But what's the difference for that? Good to talk to your accountant. But again, it takes a village. Bringing in your accountant, bringing in your banker, bringing in your attorney, or even your business consultant. Completing your personal financial statement. That's critical for a bank to determine your personal net worth. But completing that you can also provide guidance, and the SBA forms. Completing those SBA forms when you're ready to submit a completed loan package. So we could help you determine which SBA forms are applicable to the program that you're looking to participate in. Loan decisioning and the process. For many business owners, this could be a grind. It could be difficult and challenging. And that's where communication with the banker and your banker conveying and helping you understand what the decision-making process involves, it helps to alleviate some of the frustration. Because I hear from a lot of business owners when they're looking for financing, it could be a frustrating process. And that's for lack of education. Well, not education, lack of communication. And that's where having a good relationship with your banker, but having open communication, very, very tight communication is critical. And that's where a banker or advisor, they let you know how you can clearly show, or we emphasize clearly showing how the loan will be paid back. Evidence or experience, that's going to be on the export strategy plan. What are your cash reserves? What's your contingency plan if the bank says no? What's your plan B? Because if a bank tells you no, that doesn't mean you stop. When you're going into this, I've known too many business owners and they don't have quit in their name. So we talk about not only plan A, but plan B and C. So I'll touch a little on the specifics. I've done several SBA Export Express loans for equipment for those involved in manufacturing and exporting to Korea, Japan, Asia, parts of Asia. Export Express it's a fast track, very for the bank, from the bank's end. It's a much more simpler process in terms of documentation. It's for loans up to 500,000, and depending on the loan amount, it could range from the prime rate. Back then, the prime rate was around 3%. The prime rate today is 8.5%, plus a margin of 3%. So that 8.5 plus 3, that's that could be pretty hefty with that 11.5 to prime plus 6.5. But good to talk to your banker to determine what the rate would be. And the benefit to the bank, as well as the one applying the client, is it provides for a 90% guarantee for it. So if it's a 100,000 Export Express loan, 90,000 of that is guaranteed by the Small Business Administration. There's a 10,000 of that would be exposed to the bank. So it gives a little bit of comfort to the bank in terms of they'd be willing with that huge, substantial guarantee to lend. But regardless, that export strategy, showing your expertise, showing that you know what you're doing when you're getting into exporting, that's going to be primary. Approval based on credit worthiness. Taking care of yourself personally is critical. Making sure your debts are paid on time, you have a strong credit score, you've got some personal net worth, but demonstrating that you're a viable credit risk to the bank is very important. So it's good to take care of yourself personally, and then coming to the bank and showing your own personal strength, that you have personal financial wherewithal to take care of the obligation. And again, there's quick turnaround. There's also two other types of programs. There's an internal trade and export working capital program, and those are for the larger loans up to 5 million. Also related to export financing, but for those programs, that's where I invite you to talk to us, talk to your advisors and your mentors, and we could see which program their request could fit into, and explain why. And that's me, Demini Kihei. I'm a vice president and senior commercial banking officer. And that's my my work number, and I could also be reached on LinkedIn. I communicate a lot with folks everywhere through LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Debbie, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Let's see. Generally, what, just in your experience, what are, okay, let's back up for a second. When you think about companies that are just getting into exporting, what are the types of things that they need money for? They need working capital for. What are they coming to you and CPB for loans through the export finance program, typically?
Yeah, Rob, but typically when they first come in, they're looking for a loan because they're not too sure how the line of credit works. So they immediately gravitate towards a loan, thinking that's what they need to get. And that's where we need to come in and guide. Because many times folks come in and they apply for $75,000 loan, and they're saying that they need some inventory because they've got a contract to sell this to Malaysia, for example, or they've got product to sell to Malaysia. Not understanding that how the structure works, not understanding that maybe they could have a partial loan for permanent working capital and a line of credit on top of that.
Mm.
They come in, they apply for that. A bank takes it in, not necessarily CPB, but I've seen banks take it in. They see the request and they match it to the need, declined. Because there's no conversation. It's just declined, and then a letter goes out to the individual and lets them know that the loan's been declined. And that's where we need more mentorship, more. That's why it's so critical to have that mentorship, that guidance, and that teaching by the bankers.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I'm glad to hear you bring up the topic of mentorship, because I'd like our audience to certainly take away that somebody like Demini will be a mentor for you. The Hawaii Pacific Export Council will be a mentor for you. But all of the speakers we've had today are mentors and consultants to you. For example, Seth Reese, you should engage in a conversation with him about intellectual property and what you're trying to do in the long term, what your goals are, what are your ideas for the future. Same with shipping. I cannot tell you how many companies fall down on the shipping aspect of getting their product to the customer. They haven't thought about it ahead of time and talk to Peter Stams or talk to Brian Suzuki at Hawaii Air Cargo and explain the product, explain the packaging, explain who the customers are, and they can work with you and consult with you. And as Demini said, be your mentor on that topic and save you so much time, energy, and money later. So start these conversations now. Okay, with that, Demini, I'd like to thank you. That was an excellent presentation, and I hope that our attendees and viewers of this future YouTube video will contact you and start talking about how you can mentor them on your export financing issues.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to our cultural issues module of Export University 101. This is a topic that I really like because it's extremely important to understand cultures and languages and things that you're getting into when you go into these foreign markets. We're very fortunate to have on our HPEC board Dale Wright, who is a retired U.S. commercial service officer who's been based all over the world, and he can tell you exactly where he's been based. He's currently based in Hawaii, Kai. And he has an ukulele band who would love to perform for you, which he can put on his final slide. I've also asked our HPEC's treasurer, Neil Rath, to join in and give some comments because he has some very strong experience with dealing with China specifically, having lived in China and worked in China and worked with Chinese companies and studied a lot of Chinese. And he has a very unique perspective on the China market, which a lot of our Hawaii companies are interested in. And Dale certainly and I have a lot of experience in Japan as well, so we can talk about that a little bit. We don't have any slides here, but Dale, why don't you begin, and we'll just have an open-ended conversation about the cultural issues of exporting.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I mean, one of the things I want to do is as I go through my program here, I'm going to give some scenarios, cross-cultural scenarios, and I'd like to have some of our people online today maybe answer what went wrong with the American business person who went overseas thinking they were going to do some great business. Cross-cultural communication is actually often overlooked. It's vitally important, but a lack of understanding can often lead to failed negotiations. And one thing to keep in mind is that when you're dealing with companies overseas, you're actually dealing with people, right? So it's important that you understand the trade barriers, our perceptions of what's transpiring, how that can influence the process, our beliefs, values, customs, and stereotypes, as well as our interlocutors' beliefs, values, customs, and stereotypes. So I want to read the first scenario to you and see if we can get some interesting response for this. So within the past decade, Ray Cisneros had worked hard to become the top salesperson for the entire West Coast district of his company, which manufactures and distributes vinyl floor coverings. When his company received an invitation to make a marketing presentation to a large distribution firm in Buenos Aires, Ray's Hispanic background, fluency in Spanish, and excellent salesmanship all made him the logical choice for the assignment. He had set up an appointment to make his presentation on the same day that he arrived from Los Angeles. But upon arrival, the marketing representative of the host firm, who met him at the airport, told him that the meeting had been arranged 2 days later so that Ray could rest after the long trip and have a chance to see some of the local sites and enjoy hospitality. Ray tried to assure his host that he felt fine and was prepared to make the presentation that day. Ray could see no good reason not to get on with the business at hand. Eventually, the marketing representative, somewhat reluctantly, intervened on Ray's behalf, and the meeting was reset for later that afternoon. But once the meeting began, Ray noticed that the Argentinian executives never really got beyond the exchange of pleasantries. Finally, the vice president in charge suggested that they meet again the next afternoon. Ray was feeling increasingly frustrated with the excruciatingly slow pace of the negotiations. Okay, so anybody have any comments about this?
This is Rob. I'll chime in and say that my experience, this was Argentina, I believe,
Yes.
but generally speaking, the rest of the world moves a little slower in negotiation. I don't mean slower in a bad way. I just mean it takes some time to get people to warm up to you and your company and what you're doing and what have you. So I just leave it at that, a lot of American companies, they expect to go to the Tokyo International Gift Show for the first time and try to leave with some orders. And that's really not the way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ray had a Hispanic background, but yet he was raised in an American cultural, business environment, right? So time is money. And he was frustrated that, in Argentina, like a lot of South American cultures, it's the process that's important, right? So he should have chilled out and um, and just let the whole hospitality thing take its course. But yeah, definitely. So he was caught between kind of in a limbo between multiple cultures, and that often happens.
Sure.
Okay, another example. Let's see here. Okay. So Harold Jefferson, an electronics engineer for an American satellite manufacturer, has spent weeks negotiating with a Japanese parts distributor in Yokohama. The Japanese executive, Mr. Kushiro, was tough in negotiations, so progress had been slow. Eventually, Harold felt that they had common ground and an equitable deal could be worked out to the advantage of both companies. On the final day of negotiations, Harold was pleased to announce that Mr. Kushiro that their thinking was parallel, and he was ready to draw up the contract. Mr. Kushiro pleasantly thanked Harold for his time and left the meeting without further discussion. What happened here? Anybody hazard a guess?
I have to imagine that Harold jumped to a conclusion that they could all kind of clean their hands off and be done with this deal without realizing that Kushiro-san was probably just ready for the most important part of that interaction. After having spent so much time and energy on kind of building that rapport and learning a bit about each other and how each party thinks about different challenges and potential solutions, that was probably just beginning to be the most important exchange that Harold would have had in that whole process. And he really jumped the gun and probably missed out on what could have been maybe a really strong ending for both parties.
Yeah,
I would
so,
also suggest that I believe his name is Kushida-san.
yeah,
Kushida-san is probably not the only person that has input, and he can't do this on his own. He has to, no matter how senior he is, he still has to go develop the Nemawashi and get other people to buy into the process before he can come back and work on a deal. But also, I would really suggest, again, as so many of our Hawaii companies are interested in Japan as an export market, I would suggest that things in Japan don't move that quickly. And it would be surprising to me if our salesman actually had closed that deal, that it usually takes a couple years or more, or three.
Yeah.
Most people suggest 3 for Japan. When I was younger, I heard 5. Maybe it is speeding up a little. I don't know, but 3 years is about right for getting things moving in Japan. That's just my input.
Well, I lived in Japan for 9 years and speak the language, and this answer actually surprised me. What it says is the term parallel has a different meaning to Japanese than it does to American. So I guess it depends on how you translate it. But we think of the word parallel as meaning compatible, right? Being on the same track or whatever. However, to the Japanese, it represents a lack of agreement. Positions that will always remain apart, never to meet, as with 2 main tracks. So when Harold stated that their thinking was parallel, Mr. Kushiro took it to mean that the negotiations were over. So, it was probably a thing of translation more than anything, but the perception of what parallel means. So, but with cross-cultural stuff, I've seen more international business transactions fail, I think, due to cultural differences than about anything. And few people study this topic, actually. And some people think they're already attuned to the differences. So let me read you another example. Okay. So there's a large Baltimore manufacturer of cabinet hardware, and they've been working for months to locate a suitable distributor for their project in Europe. Finally invited to present a demonstration to a reputable distribution company in Frankfurt, it sent one of its most promising young executives, Fred Wagner, to make the presentation. Fred not only spoke fluent German, but also felt a special interest in this assignment because his paternal grandparents had immigrated from the US to the US from Frankfurt in the 20s. When Fred arrived at the conference room where he had been making his presentation, he shook hands firmly, greeted everybody with a hearty Guten Tag, and even remembered how to bow his head slightly, as is the German custom. Fred, a very effective speaker and past president of the Baltimore Toastmasters Club, prefaced his presentation with a few humorous anecdotes to set a relaxed and receptive atmosphere. However, he felt that his presentation was not very well received by the company executives. In fact, his instincts were correct, for the German company chose not to distribute Fred's hardware products. So what happened here? Anybody hazard a guess?
I'll just give you what I feel I've seen in my life. So let's say, for example, American companies, on the one hand, America's a melting pot, right?
Right.
My family is all from Norway. Your family's from somewhere. Neil's family's from somewhere. We have a lot of Japanese Americans, Korean Americans, Chinese Americans, what have you in Hawaii. My experience is that if you, I don't know how to put it, but you send a Korean American to Korea, for example, there's not a lot of strong benefit to that, in my experience. That you're expecting something that is a very difficult task for that Korean American person to handle. And maybe that's what happened with this guy who went to Germany, probably spoke, had high school German class and, could speak some, but I don't know. That's just my experience, that maybe the customer felt like you're not sending us necessarily somebody authentic, but you're trying to appease us with this German somewhat speaking person. I don't know. That's my
Yeah,
guess.
I think partly that's true. And also what it doesn't say, but Fred was rather a young guy.
Yeah.
And so, for the Germans, if you're too young, they just don't take you seriously, right?
Correct.
And then he gets up and he kind of, talks and jokes and stuff like that, which further erodes his respectability, I think, in front of these German, counterparts.
Germans are very serious in general. Again, it's funny because I think when you talk about any of these cultural issues, we're told in our society that you can't generalize. But I do think you can generalize on some of these cultural issues, because it's fair to say that Germans are generally serious people. Now, when you get to know Germans, of course they joke around and
Sure.
but just in a general business environment, they're quite serious. And I think that that's true with Japan and many other places. I think that they come to the US and they're surprised about how much maybe we're joking around in meetings and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So another aspect of cross-cultural communications, of course, is the nonverbal. And that can really vary by country to country. So let me read this to you. Randy Hightower, recently appointed to manage his firm's office in Singapore, was anxious to do well in his first overseas assignment. Shortly after his arrival, he called his first staff meeting to outline the objectives for the coming year. He had already met with his staff individually and was feeling quite confident about the prospects for having a good first year. Toward the end of the staff meeting, Randy, in his characteristic upbeat fashion, told his employees that he looked forward to working with them, that he anticipated this would be their best year ever. To emphasize his optimism for the coming year, Randy punctuated his verbal remarks by slapping his fist against his palm. The reaction was instantaneous. Most people laughed, giggled, or looked embarrassed. Unfortunately, he felt that the point of his dramatic climax was lost amid the laughter. So what did he do wrong there?
I have to imagine that his gesture may have had some kind of a cultural connotation that he did not understand. But without knowing what that is, I won't say any more about that. And I'll leave that to you, Dale, maybe. But I also think that it probably could have come across as extremely possibly a little degrading and kind of condescending to. I know that his intention was just pure optimism, but to come to a group of people that had been maybe already at work in that location and suddenly have someone new come in and say with great confidence that they're going to have their best year ahead, could potentially come off to the people in the room as being very condescending and blustery and possibly very conceited. So that might have kind of rubbed the audience the wrong way by talking that way.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Like you say, we don't know exactly what the, slapping of the palm, fist into the palm means, but apparently in Singapore, it's tantamount to giving the bird, to giving the middle finger to the audience. So that's why they were embarrassed and giggled. Okay, another vignette. This one, let's go to the Middle East. So Steve Lee, he's an executive at Harvard Insurance Company, was sent to Kuwait to investigate damages to 7 hotels that had happened during the Gulf War. Now, back in the States, Steve had the reputation of being extremely affable and sociable. The day after Steve arrived in Kuwait City, he met with Mr. Saeed, the manager of one of the insured tourist hotels. His previous telephone conversations with Mr. Saeed were upbeat and had led him to expect that Mr. Saeed was interested in getting the claims settled quickly and efficiently. His initial meeting with Mr. Saeed went extremely well, with both men agreeing on most of the issues discussed. At the end of that first meeting, they shook hands, and to emphasize the depth and sincerity of his goodwill, Steve grasped Mr. Saeed's hand with 2 hands and shook vigorously. For reasons that Steve never understood, the subsequent meetings with Mr. Saeed were never cordial and friendly as that first meeting. So those of you who know the Middle East probably know the answer to this, but what do you think? Anybody else in our audience? No?
Well, hey, Dale. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm thinking it came off a little just too abrupt, and depending on how vigorously he shook Saeed's hand, yeah, it could be construed as a bit insulting or just overbearing a bit.
Yeah, so that's true. So what do we know about hands in Middle East cultures? The left hand versus the right hand, for instance.
Oh, I don't know, but I'd be
So
interested to see.
In the Middle East, you don't use your left hand at all because, well, how can I say this delicately? It's what you use to wipe your butt with, you see. And so you using the left hand is considered a huge insult. And so, if he had just stuck with his right hand shaking, that would have been fine. But to do both like that really turned Mr. Saeed off. So, yeah. So this is just another example of some of the, nonverbal communications that you have to work with. I just wanted to give you some personal examples of stuff that I've had, and maybe Neil, you can chime in here too. But, let's look at Japan for a minute, because a lot of people are interested in the Japanese market, of course. I was a student one time at Keio University and thought my Japanese was pretty good. And so I had learned that there was a course that was being offered at Keio for teaching potential teachers of Japanese. And I thought, I kind of would like to do that. I'd like to teach Japanese at some point when I go back to the United States. And so I walked up to the window, which was taking matriculation and stuff. And I told them, well, I'm here studying at KO. I'd love to take this course and blah, blah, blah. And they give the typical Japanese response, sa muzukashii na, which means that's going to be difficult. And I didn't take no for an answer. So I, pressed my case 2 or 3 times, and I still got muzukashii na back, as a response. So finally it dawned on me that, yeah, this wasn't going to work. So, and whatever the reason, it could have been anti-gaijin bias or who knows what. But, I realized that, that wasn't going to work at all. And another example of what I ran into cross-cultural communication wise in a business setting, I used to work for an advertising company in Tokyo, and they asked me to write a book. Canon Camera was our main client. And Canon asked me to write a book on taking pictures with their cameras. So I worked with a Japanese, what we call designer, who, designed the layout of the book and all this kind of stuff. And as many of you know, the Japanese love manga, right? Comics, comic books, and all that stuff. And so this guy kept wanting to put in all these cutesy little figures all over my book. And, this was supposed to be a book that, was for serious photographers who were spending $200-300 to buy a Canon camera, right? So I kept trying to say to him, look, we can't have these manga characters all over the place. It was a 200 some page book, and it was like every page had them. So I jawed with him for probably half a year at least. And I eventually got him to see my side of it, kind of. He got rid of like 3/4 of them. A quarter still were there, but that was like our compromise. So, just an example, even though I spoke fluent Japanese and whatever, his cultural kind of center point and mine were like totally different, and it was hard to make him understand, where I was coming from. So that's one of the things. And another thing, that if you're dealing in Japanese cultures, some of you might have heard the phrase "deru kugi wa utareru," the nail that sticks up get hammered down, which is, kind of a contrast with us Americans. We kind of like to ballyhoo our attributes and, the attributes of our company and whatever. It doesn't go over that well in Japan, right? Because, you're being sort of, selfish or whatever. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't quite understand, the Japanese mentality when you go into a negotiation. The other thing in Japan, which is critically important, is business cards. Some Americans like to come and pretend like their business cards are playing cards, kind of scatter them around to everybody, right? As most of you know, probably, business card is a formality, the giving of a business card, and, companies with a bow and all that kind of stuff. And I've seen American business people do this before, where they just kind of, just fling them to everybody, and that's never a good sign. So
Right, like it's blackjack.
it's like it's blackjack, exactly.
But the funny part is, if you watch really old movies, US movies, you can see there was a time when the business card exchange, and they called them calling cards or visitor cards, was quite an important thing. And people spent a lot of money on the quality of the paper and that sort of thing. And that has just gone away in the US. In fact, I go to a lot of meetings in the US, and people don't even exchange cards, or they don't have them. But it's still very important in Japan and Korea. It's still extremely important.
Yes. And the other thing in Japan is the hierarchy. You have to become aware of who you're dealing with, what their hierarchy is in the company. And, even as a Japanese speaker, back in 1979 or 1980, I think it was, I had a part-time job with Mitsubishi Corporation, the largest trading company in the world. And the guy that was my kind of handler, if you will, came to me and he said, "Oh, the Kacho-san wants to see you, the head of the section." So I'm like, "Oh, okay." I had never even talked to the man. So my handler said, "Well, you have to speak your most polite Japanese possible. And I had grown up with Japanese host families where, we didn't speak politely, right? We spoke in, well, for lack of a better term, guttural Japanese. And Japanese is one of those languages, sort of like Korean too, where it's extremely, there's different levels of it, according to who you're speaking to and who's speaking to you and whatever. So I thought to myself, well, if I try to speak in really highfalutin Japanese, I'm probably going to blow it because I'm just not that used to it. Now I could speak in like the mid-level politeness. And so when I went to the meeting, that's what I did. But I showed him deference, of course, because he was the boss. So I left thinking, well, who knows what is going to happen. Next day, they offered me a full-time job. So I guess I did it right. But, I had to be aware of his status in the company, my status, which was quite low, and, the kind of language I was using. So these are things to think about in Japan.
But probably, they gave you big points for trying.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking too.
That level of Japanese is called keigo, and it's quite difficult. I never really got good at it at all.
No, right. Yeah,
I'd like to maybe make a comment about what you just said, Rob, which is points for trying. I think that this is probably relevant really almost anywhere in the world. But from my experience living and working in China for many years, I can say that making an effort to communicate or behave or spend your time in a way that demonstrates that you've really made an effort to try to kind of sink in and immerse and kind of treat your hosts or your counterparts on the other side of the table as in a way that they feel familiar with and in a way that they might make them feel comfortable. That can go an enormously long way with your counterparties. Just demonstrating that you're making an effort, even if you don't necessarily do it right, even if it's just halfway there, or you haven't had a chance to master whatever it is that you're trying to do. If they're seeing that you're really consciously making an effort, it can really add tremendous value to your interactions in a way that I think even goes beyond potentially being culturally fluent. We talked a moment ago about how maybe sending over, I'll keep it in the China context, but let's say a US company were to send over someone who was born and raised in a Chinese family and grew up speaking Chinese and maybe spent a bunch of time over in China as a child. They may have a level of cultural fluency that's really strong and sophisticated compared to someone who didn't have that upbringing, an American who had no connection to China growing up or anything like that. And that's can be helpful in many ways, but sometimes I think there can be a value of a complete foreigner in a place like China, demonstrating that they've made a conscious effort to try to appreciate and adopt some elements of how they think the folks in China will be acting and behaving and speaking, can add a new value layer to that interaction that I think can be just enormously valuable to the overall relationship between the two organizations and between you yourself as a professional and your counterparty. So I have to imagine that translates in some way all over the world. And so for us Americans, it can be a very important lesson just to make some effort and show that you're there to have a really meaningful engagement and interaction in that culture.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the American Armed Forces Network, which you can get if you're in Europe or wherever there's American bases, Korea, Japan, or whatever, has this little thing they call "a little language goes a long way." That's one of their infomercials. And I told this to Neil yesterday, but first thing I ever did when I was in international trade was go on a trade mission to Taiwan. And it was with the state of Mississippi and the governor and all that stuff. And so we were greeted by the premier of the Republic of China, who gave us this great banquet. And as many of you know, in China, it's very customary that you're feted with a very nice banquet, meal, whatever, by your Chinese counterparts. During that banquet, of course, there's the raising of the glasses, the gambei, as they say in Chinese. So the premier of Republic of China got up and gambeied to our whole group, sat down, and what should transpire next is that our governor should have gotten up and given, a return toast. I was brand new on the staff at the time, so I wasn't really, knowledgeable about how far I should go in doing stuff. And my boss apparently never briefed the governor on what he should do. So he just sat there, and there was this huge pregnant silence. So even though my Chinese is not nearly as fluent as Neil's is, especially at the time, I got up and I just said, I toast to the friendship of the Republic of China and the state of Mississippi, and sat down, and that apparently saved the day. The governor the next morning told me he liked my style and gave me an automatic raise. So I went from thinking I was going to get fired to getting a raise. But and as we were leaving the hall that night, Sun Yun Swan, who was the premier, said to me, and he was educated at Cornell University, by the way. So he said to me, "Oh, your Chinese is so good. Where did you learn it?" And so I told him, But that's just a case of, even though my Chinese wasn't all that great, a little language goes a long way, right? So Rob, how much more time do we have?
Well, I think we should wrap it up.
Okay.
But I would ask you to think about the attendees to this event, and they're possibly going to Japan or Korea or China or Germany or Mexico or somewhere for the first time. And they might think, yeah, I need to do some research before I get to these markets.
That was going to be my next thing.
So where do you recommend people go to?
So there's a plethora of resources on cross-cultural communications. One of the best ones is the human relations area files. And I think we can probably put this up on the website later, huh, Rob?
Sure.
But it's EHRAF worldcultures.yale.edu. It's existed for over 50 years, and it's probably the most comprehensive compendium of cultural anthropology in existence, separated into 310 separate cultural files. So that's one. Brigham Young University also has something called
Dale, can you say that again slowly? I'm going to type it in.
Okay, right. So human relations area files.
Okay. Okay.
And it's EHRAF worldcultures.yale.edu.
Yeah, just bear with me a second. I'll share this website with the audience. Okay.
And the next one is Brigham Young University. They have something called Culturegrams, which is a 4-page cultural orientation covering customs and courtesies and lifestyles in like 200 different countries. And that is HTTPS kennedy.byu.edu/culturegrams. Culturegrams. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and the US government has some things too. One of the things that we who worked for the US government and were sent overseas, we often relied on was what we call the post reports. So every place we have an embassy around the world, they have to write these reports. And, they're 16 to 20 pages in length, talk about the transportation system, newspapers, medical facilities, housing, all that kind of stuff, as well as cultural info. And you can find that on the Department of State website.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So that's just a few of them. You also might want to look at English language newspapers, like the Japan Times that they have in Japan, and most major metro areas around the world have English language newspapers. And, you know, just reading these, you can get a good feel for what's going on in the country and, you know, some of their cultural aspects and whatever. So.
Okay, well, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. We're over time. And I'm supposed to do a presentation on international marketing basics, but what I'll do is record that separately and send it around to the audience. But I'd like to thank everybody who was here today. Of course, Dale Wright and Neil Rath from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council who are here now. We had Demini Kihei from Central Pacific Bank, Seth Reese from Watanabe Ing, Peter Stams from UPS, Kanzo Nara from Imagine Web Creation, of course, Jamie Lum from DBET, who we thank for helping us put on our HiSTEP programming every year. So with that, let's sign off. This is Rob Hack from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. And stay in touch with us. We'll be letting you know about some of our upcoming program for the rest of the year. We'll have a schedule built out within the next few weeks. So thanks again for attending, and mahalo. Have a great rest of your day.
Mahalo, Rob. Thanks a lot for putting this on.
Thank you. Mahalo.
Thanks.